She stood in the first-class line, dressed modestly, her headscarf neatly wrapped, a simple coat draped over her shoulders. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry, just quiet confidence. Across from her, Victoria Harding scoffed, her designer suit pristine, her perfume strong enough to announce her presence before she spoke. With a smirk, she muttered, "First class, huh? I guess they let anyone in these days." What happened next left the entire plane completely silent and changed Victoria's life forever. Judging someone by their appearance is a mistake many people make, but few get the chance to regret it so publicly. This was one of those moments, a lesson in humility, respect, and the shocking truth that no one saw coming. Before we get into this incredible story, let me ask you, have you ever misjudged someone only to be completely proven wrong? Keep watching, because what happens on this flight will make you think twice before ever looking down on anyone again. Los Angeles International Airport was a hive of movement, a never-ending flow of people rushing from one place to another. The sounds of hurried footsteps, rolling suitcases, and muffled airport announcements blended into a constant, familiar hum. Amid the chaos, a young woman stood in the first-class line. She wasn't like the others around her. No designer logos, no high heels clicking against the polished floor, no oversized sunglasses shielding her face. Instead, she wore a modest, well-fitted dress, a long coat that reached past her knees, and a neatly wrapped headscarf. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't demanding attention. And yet, she was impossible to ignore. Across from her, standing in the same line, was Victoria Harding. Victoria didn't just notice the woman, she fixated on her. Everything about her felt wrong to Victoria, not in a way she could immediately explain, but in a way that made her instinctively look twice. Victoria was the opposite of the woman in every way. Her suit was designer, custom-tailored to fit her like a second skin. Her diamond earrings sparkled under the bright airport lights. Her perfume, expensive and unmistakable, left a trail as she moved. Everything about her screamed power, wealth, and status. And yet, as she looked at the woman in front of her, something inside her twisted with irritation. Why was she here? Victoria's eyes trailed down to the woman's old backpack, its worn edges proof of years of use. She let out a soft huff of disbelief. First class? Seriously? Her gaze sharpened. She had flown first class her entire life, and she knew exactly the kind of people who belonged here. And this woman? She wasn't one of them. Victoria's lips curled into a smirk as she leaned forward just slightly and muttered just loud enough to be heard. First class, huh? Guess they'll let anyone in these days. She expected the woman to flinch, to look embarrassed or out of place. Instead, the woman simply turned her head and smiled. It wasn't forced, it wasn't nervous, it was calm, controlled, unshaken. "Yes," she said, her voice smooth and effortless. "Life is full of surprises." Victoria blinked. That was not the reaction she had expected. For a brief second, something about the woman's response unnerved her. There was no desperation to prove herself, no hesitation, no insecurity. It was as if she knew something Victoria didn't. Victoria narrowed her eyes. She decided right then and there that this woman had to be a mistake. Maybe she got lucky. Maybe someone gifted her a ticket. Maybe she was here by accident. Because women like her didn't just belong in first class. Victoria let out a small chuckle under her breath. Well, she thought to herself as the line moved forward, this should be interesting. What she didn't know was that her entire world was about to be turned upside down. The flight was finally boarding. First-class passengers were called forward, and Victoria, with practiced elegance, picked up her designer handbag and strode towards the gate. She didn't even bother looking back at the woman she had just insulted. Why would she? As she stepped onto the jet bridge, a small, satisfied smirk formed on her lips. First class was her domain, a world of luxury, exclusivity, and refinement. But the moment she reached her seat, her confidence wavered. Because sitting right next to her, settling into the plush first-class seat as if she had all the time in the world, was the very woman Victoria had looked down on. For a second, Victoria just stared. No, this has to be a mistake. She double-checked her ticket. Seat 2A. The woman next to her? Seat 2B. Her stomach twisted. Of all the people on this plane, of all the seats in first class, why did it have to be her? Victoria let out a sharp breath and dropped into her seat, crossing her arms. She could feel the woman's presence beside her, calm, collected, completely unbothered. That irritated her even more. After a few moments of silence, Victoria turned to her. forcing a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So," she started, her voice laced with feigned curiosity. "What do you do?" The woman looked up, her soft smile still present. "I work in business." Victoria's eyebrows lifted slightly. That was an unexpected answer. "Business?" She let out a light chuckle, shaking her head. "I suppose small scale, right? Some side projects here and there?" The woman didn't react. "Some places just aren't meant for everyone," Victoria added smoothly, her eyes flicking to the luxurious surroundings of first class, as if to prove a point. The woman met her gaze, unfazed, and simply replied, "I don't think it's about where you are. It's about the kind of person you choose to be." Victoria scoffed. What kind of answer was that? She turned away, pretending to be more interested in adjusting the recline of her seat. This woman was frustrating. The plane took off, and soon the flight attendants began their service. Victoria had already decided that if she had to endure this situation, she would at least make it obvious that she belonged in first class, and the woman didn't. As the flight attendant approached, Victoria flashed a confident smile. "I'll have a glass of Chateau Margaux, please." The flight attendant nodded and turned to the woman. "And for you, ma'am, just water, please." Victoria nearly burst out laughing. "Water? You're in first class, you know. You can actually enjoy yourself here." The woman took the bottle from the flight attendant and smiled. "Sometimes simplicity is the greatest luxury." Victoria frowned. There it was again, that quiet confidence. It was starting to get under her skin. The other passengers around them had begun to notice the exchange. It wasn't just Victoria who was watching the woman now. It was everyone. There was something about her, something in the way she remained composed, despite the passive-aggressive jabs. Her presence alone was turning the situation against Victoria, and that didn't sit well with her. The unraveling of Victoria Harding. Victoria tried again. She leaned back, swirling her wine glass in slow, calculated motions. "You know," she said, her voice casual but pointed, "life is a game of status. Some people work hard and earn their place. Others just get lucky." She let her words hang in the air. The woman remained still for a moment, then turned to Victoria with an unreadable expression. "Do you really believe that?" she asked. Victoria blinked. She wasn't expecting the question. "Of course," she scoffed. "That's how the world works." The woman nodded slowly, as if absorbing the response. "Interesting." That was it. Just that single word. Victoria felt a twinge of unease. She didn't like how this conversation was going. She was supposed to have the upper hand. But somehow this woman, this nobody in a simple coat and headscarf, was making her feel defensive. She could feel the subtle shift in the cabin too. Passengers were watching them, not with admiration for Victoria, as she was used to, but with disapproval. For the first time, she wasn't being admired. She was being judged, and she hated it. Desperate to regain control, Victoria leaned forward slightly, dropping her voice into a whisper. "Look, I don't mean to offend you, but let's be real. Some people just aren't meant for this level of life. You might be here now, but that doesn't mean you belong here." She sat back, arms crossed, waiting for the woman to break, to react, to finally show some kind of emotion. But instead, the woman simply looked at her. There was no anger, no irritation, just something Victoria couldn't quite place. Then the woman spoke. "You know, Victoria," she said, her voice soft but undeniably firm, "sometimes the way we treat others says more about who we are than anything we wear or own." Victoria's breath hitched. The words struck something deep inside her, a place she didn't even know existed. She forced out a small laugh, but it came out weaker than she intended. What was happening? Why was she feeling exposed? She reached for her wine glass, but before she could take a sip, a flight attendant appeared beside them. But this time, she wasn't there for drink service. Instead, she bowed slightly toward the woman. "Madam, our captain wanted me to inform you that your flight is going smoothly, and your special team will be waiting for you in Tokyo. He also sends his regards." The air in the cabin shifted. Victoria's body stiffened. Her mind scrambled to process what she had just heard. Special team, the captain sending regards. Her eyes darted to the woman, heart pounding. The woman turned to her, that same calm smile never fading. "Yes," she said simply, "I own this airline." Victoria's world collapsed. Her throat went dry. Everything she thought she knew about this woman, everything she had assumed, was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. The person she had spent the entire flight mocking, belittling, and looking down on was not just wealthy, she was powerful. And suddenly, Victoria wasn't the one in control anymore. Victoria's world cracked open in an instant. Her mind struggled to catch up with what she had just heard. The words, "I own this airline," echoed in her head, louder than the quiet hum of the aircraft, louder than the murmurs that had begun to spread through the cabin. She blinked once, twice. Had she misheard? But no. The woman beside her sat with that same quiet confidence, her expression unchanged. She didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She simply existed in a reality that Victoria had failed to see until now. And then, the weight of it all came crashing down. Victoria had spent the entire flight subtly, yet persistently, mocking the very person who owned the plane she was sitting on. Her stomach twisted. A cold sweat prickled at the back of her neck. She glanced around, realizing that every pair of eyes in first class was now locked onto her. The disapproving glances, the hushed whispers, they weren't just watching anymore. They were judging. And for the first time in her life, Victoria was the one on the outside looking in. Her fingers curled around the edge of her armrest, gripping it so tightly her knuckles turned white. This couldn't be happening. This woman, this simple, modestly dressed woman, was powerful, wealthy, respected. Her mind screamed at her to say something, anything, to regain control. But what could she say? That she didn't mean any of it? That she was just making conversation? That she had no idea who she was talking to? It all sounded so hollow. For the first time, words failed her. The silence stretched too long. The weight of her own arrogance settled on her chest like an unbearable pressure. And then, finally, she managed to force out a sound, a weak, uncertain laugh. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman turned to her, her expression unreadable. Why should it matter? Victoria's breath hitched. She felt the words physically, because they hit at the core of everything she had built her life around. She had spent years, decades, believing that power and status were meant to be worn, displayed, announced. That wealth meant something only if others could see it. And yet, here sat the wealthiest, most powerful woman she had ever encountered. A woman who didn't flaunt it. A woman who had nothing to prove. Victoria swallowed hard. Everything she thought she knew about success, about class, about worth, had just been shattered. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted her diamond bracelet. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a symbol of power. It felt like a chain. She forced herself to meet the woman's gaze, but the confidence she once had was gone. She tried again, but she couldn't find the words. The woman simply watched her, calm and composed, giving Victoria space to sit with the weight of her own mistakes. A moment passed, then another, and finally Victoria did something she had never done before. She lowered her head, not in defeat, but in shame. She let out a shaky breath, her throat tight, and then, in a voice softer than she had ever used before, she whispered, "I'm sorry." And this time, she truly meant it. Victoria had spent her entire life believing she was above others. She had always walked into rooms knowing people envied her, respected her, wanted to be her. But now, for the first time, she felt small. The woman beside her, the same woman she had dismissed, belittled, and underestimated, hadn't needed wealth to prove her worth. She hadn't needed fancy jewelry, a designer wardrobe, or an air of superiority. Her power wasn't in what she wore. It was in who she was. Victoria had spent the entire flight trying to prove she was important. But now, in the presence of true importance, she felt like a child, grasping at illusions that no longer meant anything. Her apology hung in the air between them. It felt fragile, almost inadequate. The woman tilted her head slightly, watching her, not with anger, not with gloating, but with something far worse, understanding. That made Victoria's chest tighten even more. She expected the woman to lecture her, to call her out, to throw her words back in her face. But instead, the woman simply smiled softly. "I appreciate the apology," she said, "but I hope you learn from this." That was it. No revenge, no satisfaction at seeing Victoria humbled. Just a quiet, unwavering lesson. And somehow, that made it even worse. Victoria nodded, swallowing back the embarrassment burning her throat. She had been given a second chance to walk away from this moment not just humiliated, but changed. The plane landed smoothly at Narita Airport in Tokyo. As the flight attendants prepared for disembarkation, the woman calmly gathered her things, slinging her old, worn-out backpack over one shoulder like it was the most valuable thing in the world. Not a status symbol, not a performance, just her. Victoria, still seated, watched as a group of executives in sleek business attire stood at the gate, waiting. The moment the woman stepped off the plane, they immediately bowed slightly in respect. She nodded in return, greeting them with the same warmth and grace she had shown throughout the flight. Victoria could only sit there, watching in stunned silence, because this was real power, not the kind that needed validation, not the kind that crushed others beneath it, the kind that spoke for itself. And in that moment, Victoria realized something she had never understood before. True success isn't measured by what you own. It's measured by the impact you leave behind. She finally stood, stepping out into the terminal, but she didn't rush forward, didn't try to reassert herself. Instead, she stood still, watching the woman disappear into the crowd, moving through the airport like any ordinary traveler. No special treatment, no need for attention. Victoria lowered her gaze, adjusting her expensive handbag. For the first time, it felt heavy, and for the first time, she asked herself a question she had never dared to consider. If I lost all of this, what would I have left? The answer? She wasn't sure, but maybe it was time to find out. This story is a powerful reminder that true worth isn't measured by wealth or appearances, but by how we treat others. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more eye-opening stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. More unforgettable stories are coming your way.